Imagine, you are standing on the roof of a 16-story building in Pripyat. It is mid-April 1986. It is a warm spring evening, smelling of flowers and fresh asphalt. You look at the horizon, where the Chernobyl nuclear power plant is just a few kilometers away. And suddenly, in this peaceful night sky, you see it. A huge, anthropomorphic creature with a wingspan of under 4 meters, without a head, but with blazing red eyes right in the middle of its chest. It circles silently over the reactor, and then dives sharply towards the city, flying right over your head. You feel not just cold, you feel an animalistic, primal horror that makes your fingers go numb. In the 2 weeks leading up to April 26, dozens of people in Pripyat saw this creature. Official KGB reports would call it mass psychosis due to overwork. The people call him the Black Bird of Chernobyl. But the scariest thing is not what they saw. The scariest thing is that the bird came only to those who had only a few days left to live. The shadow over the city of nuclear workers. Pripyat in April 1986 was a paradise on Earth. The average age of the population was only 26. Young engineers, doctors, and builders. The city of the future. The station worked like clockwork, exceeding plans. But behind this perfect facade, something was already starting to break. Around April 12, strange calls began to come to the police station and the hospital reception. People complained about the same thing. A constant feeling that they were being watched. Phone calls in the middle of the night, where only heavy, hoarse breathing could be heard on the receiver. Realistic nightmares about a fire devouring their bodies from the inside. The chief physician of the city hospital number 126 only shrugged his shoulders and prescribed sedatives. Of course, spring avitaminosis, overwork during the construction of the 5th power unit. However, the blood tests of some of the alarmists already showed strange anomalies, a slight decrease in leukocytes, as if they had already picked up a dose somewhere. But where? The station is operating normally. One of those who saw TAC was senior operator Valery Kodymchuk. 3 days before the accident, he told his wife that he met a huge black man with the wings of a raven at the entrance to Block 4. Valery then joked that it was probably from the night shifts that hallucinations began. His wife did not laugh. She begged him to take a day off. He did not. The night when time stopped. The night of April 26 is coming. Unit 4 was preparing for a scheduled test of the turbogenerator rotor coast down mode. A routine technical procedure that had been carried out more than once. But that night, everything went awry from the very first minutes. The atmosphere at the control panel was electrified. Deputy Chief Engineer Anatoly Dyatlov, a man with a tough character and an iron will, demanded that the test continue. Despite the fact that the reactor's power had dropped to almost zero, the station was in the so-called iodine pit. This is a state when the reactor becomes uncontrollable and capricious, like a wild animal. Young Leonid Topchinov, who was only 25 years old, begged to stop the process. But an order is an order. The control system rods that were supposed to shut down the reactor were pulled up. The reactor was accelerating like a train without brakes flying down a steep mountain. At 1 hour 23 minutes and 40 seconds, Topchinov finally presses the red emergency protection button, AZ-5. This should have saved the situation. But due to a design error, which the engineers did not even suspect, the rod ends were made of graphite. Instead of extinguishing the reaction, they worked like gasoline thrown into a fire. 2 blows. The first explosion was deafening, it was steam tearing apart the technological channels. And a second later, a second thundered. A powerful, thermodynamic blow. Those who were fishing in the cooling channel that night told a strange story. They did not just hear a roar. They saw a fantastic, unearthly beam of light shoot up into the sky above the 4th unit. It was laser blue, almost purple in color, and went straight to the zenith, parting the night clouds. It was beautiful. So beautiful that it was mesmerizing. But it was death. It was the ionized air glowing under the influence of wild, previously unseen radiation. The reactor no longer existed. The 2,000-ton biological protection plate, affectionately called Elena, flew into the air and fell back on its edge, completely exposing the burning graphite heart of the unit. Valery Kodymchuk, who was at that moment in the main circulation pumps, died instantly. His body was never found under the rubble. He became the first victim and forever remained inside the fourth unit. As if the bird really took him first. The granite scent of a peaceful atom. At this time, the city of Pripyat continued to sleep. People woke up from a distant rumble, looked out the windows, saw some kind of glow above the station, but thought it was an ordinary fire. Parents lulled their children who were crying from a sudden headache, and went back to sleep. An hour later, Lieutenant Vladimir Pravik's guard arrived at the station. The guys were going to put out an ordinary fire on the roof. They were wearing only tarpaulin jackets and helmets. No one told them that under their feet lay pieces of deadly graphite, which emit thousands of roentgens per hour. One of the firefighters picked up a piece of black substance lying on the ground with his hands to throw it out of the way. "Listen, it's warm," he said to his comrade. In 2 hours, the skin on his hands would start to turn black and peel off like a glove. They put out the fire with their bodies, literally blocking the world from the hydrogen explosion that could wipe out not only Pripyat, but also Kiev. When the boys were taken off the roof, they were nauseous, their skin had acquired a strange, brown, nuclear tan, and their mouths had a persistent, metallic taste of lead. The Bridge of Death and Silence. On the morning of April 26, the sun rose as usual. Saturday. Mothers were pushing strollers with babies, children were going to school, fishermen were carrying fresh catch from the canal. The radiation background in the city was already hundreds of thousands of times higher than the norm, but the authorities were silent. Why so panic? We had to wait for instructions from Moscow. There is a legend about the Bridge of Death, a railway bridge at the entrance to Pripyat, which offered a direct view of the station. They say that in the morning people with children gathered there to watch the beautiful blue glow over the reactor. The wind blew right at them, carrying radioactive dust. According to legend, none of those who stood on that bridge that Saturday survived. Some died within a week, some within a few years. Official historians say that this is a myth, and the bridge was not so deadly. But locals still bypass it the 10th time. The evacuation was announced only 36 hours after the disaster. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon on April 27, a calm female voice came from the loudspeakers. "Comrades, in connection with the accident at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, evacuation is announced. Take your essentials, documents and food for 3 days." They were told, for 3 days. People left unfinished tea on the tables, toys on the floor, open books. Thousands of yellow buses lined up in an endless column. The city was emptied in a few hours. Officially for 3 days. In fact, forever. The bird's tale. Today, Pripyat is a frozen monument to human self-confidence. The Ferris wheel, which has never given children a ride, it was supposed to open on May 1, is slowly rusting under the palsy wind. Trees are sprouting through the asphalt, and a draft walks through abandoned apartments, leafing through old Soviet newspapers. And what about the black bird? The old liquidators, who in reinforced concrete helicopter cabins dropped bags of sand and boron into the burning reactor vent, swore that they saw a huge black shadow rise into the sky with clouds of radioactive smoke. It made its last circle over the destroyed city and dissolved in the clouds that the wind drove to Europe. They say that this bird is not a demon or a curse. It is simply the material embodiment of our fear of what we cannot control. Of the force that we have released from its cage, calling it the peaceful atom, but have never been able to fully tame. And every time humanity becomes too self-confident again, somewhere above the concrete of the new sarcophagus, the faint sound of huge, heavy wings is heard.